knowledge. So the only proper perspective of issues is an open, contingent, perfected perspective of all the information that we're fielding, some of which may itself be theoretical to some extent, may mean that everything that hinges upon the theoretical or unproven nature of some hypothesis may wildly affect what we pretend to know. And this is, to me, I mean, this is really what is the core problem in the world today, is that basically, I mean, I don't mean to say that people are just bullshit artists, but, we could take just about any discussion on any street corner, and we would find within a very short period of time that the participants would deviate from the truth. They may agree with each other, both wrong. They may disagree with each other, neither one right, one wrong, right at best. Whatever. But the reason that we go through all these controversies amidst each other. Sometimes we may be able to get along through our differences, and other times we may not. But the differences would never exist if we merely maintained a proper perspective of whatever was before us. And that's what I'm getting at here. We should have no place in our lives for someone to say money is created out of nothing. I mean, if you just close your eyes, kick back, and think, money is created out of nothing. And that idea is preposterous. It leads you immediately to a dead end, a total void. As a statement, it's totally void of anything. Money is created out of nothing. Nothing is created out of nothing. Absolutely nothing we know of is created out of nothing, including money. Nothing we know of is created out of nothing. And this person, we later had a further discussion, and he came down to earth wee little bit, and agreed with me about, all my refinements. I explained to him it wasn't created out of nothing. But yet, I would bet you today he's told somebody that money is created out of nothing. And that's the problem. That's the problem. For laziness or ineptitude or ego or just unabashed, unmitigated sloppiness, we immediately revert from the only knowledge, the only truth that can save us, just some utter crap like money is created out of nothing. So that case of this past week's interaction, it resolves the worst case scenario. But another thing I wanted to talk about was some of the other discussions that I had. And the reason for this as well is because it's funny how this has gone for so many years. There's so many people who assume that you have some deficient ability to communicate because you use a more extensive vocabulary. You use words that they just presume somehow are redundant. How many people can raise their hand right now, immediately, and come up with a good alternate for the word obfuscation? Well, just a while ago I had a further discussion, and I came up with several alternates just for the sake of answering to someone who asserted that I was using a vocabulary beyond the reach of the normal person. But you see, that kind of thinking is itself a tremendous oversimplification. Number one, when you have an issue which is relatively convoluted, and the nuances of it, the fine nuances of it, are the most important things to grasp. They're the aha moments for the listener who by them realizes that money is not money. It's an obfuscation of money. It's an obfuscation of our promissory obligations into a, it's when they realize that and the lights go on, they realize they need to pay attention, because we're teaching about a sleight of hand, a trick. I've talked to so many people who would claim to be Christians about this, and yet, it's so, I don't know, blasphemous in my estimation that it doesn't even register with them that Christ was crucified just days after his famous demonstration at the temple of the money changers. Money changers. Do you realize how many people have lived their whole lives, and I mean Jews and Muslims are familiar with this story as well. 3 major religions across the world. And yet, how many of us have ever wondered what that expression, money changers, means? What was the obfuscation of the money changers? Even Scripture doesn't teach us. But we're the ones who are doing it. How then can we not know it? And why do we not understand it? When there is supposed to be a debt to a purported bank, how is it that we just simply accept that the bank gave up something to us, that we don't receive anything from the bank, but a representation of our own promissory obligation, and we think the bank gave up property? If we were to think that rightly, we would have to trace it back to its beginning. How did the first dollar come into circulation? Somebody went down and they signed a contract at a bank to owe the bank $1, even though the bank didn't even have the dollar and wouldn't give nothing up for it but the cost of publishing it. And for 2 cents or 1/10 of a cent or 1/2 of a cent or whatever the case might have been, published that dollar into existence and then said, now you owe it to me, plus 3 or 4 or 5 times that in interest. And all the while that you are servicing what is a $5 obfuscation of your obligation, we're going to call the debt just the dollar, and we're going to assume that you have to pay interest because this dollar represented property of the bank, which is at risk. How is it that we just accepted all this, all of our lives, all of us? How is it that we just accepted that? Why do we believe it? This is what I mean when I say we are our own worst enemies. You know, Obama was elected, repeating this Hopi legend, which concludes, we are the ones we have been waiting for. He borrowed that as if we were going to solve something which hadn't been solved. And while he was campaigning, he didn't even tell us what the solution was. Just called it change you can believe in. What's the change, ladies and gentlemen? There is none. What could we believe in? Nothing of substance was even intimated, much less offered. There's no cause for belief whatsoever. So, we are our own worst enemies. This idea that I have some kind of communication problem has been something that I've had to deal with all my life. And you might think that I do then, But I have these author friends, back in the 70s when I began to write, and each of them encouraged me to write because I had important things to communicate. At the same time, in evaluating my writing, they made offhand estimations of its deficiencies. It was too wordy. It was too convoluted. The sentences were too long. And I told a story earlier today, and I think it warrants retelling again. I have to repeat it very often. And this is a story about friends helping me with constructive criticism and teaching. A good friend of mine at the time, a fellow I haven't seen for many years, several times over, published author of technical works, mostly owing to a belief in my message, took me under his wing. He's quite a few years my senior. Insisted I get a book. It's called The Elements of Style. And I mention this because it reflects on, the material at hand here. And what I'm getting at is where our issues really lie. The Elements of Style, the copy that I have, it's William Strunk Jr. and E.B. White. It was a college textbook. It's a small book, including its index, 92 pages, the copy I have. That being approximately 4 inches by 7 inches, something like that. Not a particularly challenging work, but it's a guideline for authors. And so it's really, in truth, a guideline for communication for all of us, no matter what we do and what we have to say. But I studied this book. I've probably read it, I would assume, something in the neighborhood of 40 or 50 times. Every once in a while I come back to it. And my friend Keith Matthews had insisted that I get a copy of it, and I read it a half a dozen times immediately.